One, two, 1, 2. We are live. We are live. Let's get it. Let's get it. What is up? What is up? What is up, everybody? Thank you guys for being here. Make sure you hit that like button if you haven't hit that like button. Tom, I see you asking for a wrench back, but I'm not sure what Tom you are. We had a bunch of Toms come through here, but I'm not sure which Tom you are. So if you can give me some sort of hint as to which Tom you are, because obviously this is not the screen name that you used in my chat prior because you had a wrench with that name. So I just need you to quickly identify who you are so I know who I'm giving this wrench to, if you don't mind. But things are getting interesting. Oh, Tom Amasta. Well, why didn't you say so? There you go, brother. You got your wrench. Appreciate you refreshing my memory there. Thank you for that. Shout out to everybody watching on Rumble. Make sure you hit that thumbs up if you're watching on Rumble as well. And things are getting interesting. I haven't really been paying much attention to this war that's been raging right in our side of the world. And for most of our lives, we've heard about these wars in the Middle East and in Africa and, Asia with the Korean War and the Vietnam War and all that shit. And a lot of us have always said, if our government is going to wage war and use military forces to do something, do something legitimate in the world, why don't they go after the drug cartels right here on our side of the world, in the Western world? Well, that's exactly what Donald Trump is doing. And this is all being done under Operation Southcom, Operation United States Southern Command. And Southcom has been in effect since 2018, but it was publicly announced by General Mark Milley in 2020. Okay. And the operations that were taking place in 2018 were mainly intel gathering operations because they were monitoring the migrant caravans, who was funding the migrant caravans, and where these people were coming from. And then in 2020, when Operation Southcom was announced, that was basically 2 years after all that intel was collected and all that information was gathered, and they were then ready to use kinetic forces to go after specific high value targets in that region. And by region, I mean Latin America. Now we have full on kinetic warfare taking place in the Caribbean, South and Central America, and Venezuela seems to be the biggest target. And the reason why Venezuela is the biggest target is because that's where most of the dope is coming from. That's where most of the people who were organizing and funding the migrant caravans from that part of the world, from Latin America, that's where they were based. And Nicolas Maduro is somewhat of a mini Pablo Escobar himself when it comes to the drug dealing. Now, the next question would be, why now? Why is Trump now choosing to go after the cartels and the drug dealers? Well, that's because after they flooded our country with the Tren de Aragua gang members and the prisoners that they let out of the prisons in Venezuela and all those other countries, these people now are being rounded up in the mass deportation operations. And from those roundups, they're getting intel on other operations and other operators within Latin America that are involved in not only shipping drugs to America, but shipping migrants, shipping illegal aliens into America as well. So going after the drug cartels will essentially shut down the human trafficking operations simultaneously. And Trump is not playing around. I mean, we've seen the video footage time and time again, video after video, of these dope boats that the military is trying to intercept, and they don't. Instead of stopping and surrendering, they would press on and get blown up. And there's been several of those boats blown up by drones, helicopters, planes, ships, etc. And now Trump is talking about unleashing U.S. forces on the ground in Venezuela. Now, make no mistake about it. There are already forces operating on the ground in Venezuela, but they're mainly there undercover gathering intel. But what Trump is talking about is actually launching a full-fledged invasion of Venezuela. Now, will that happen? I don't know, because we're dealing with Trump. And what Trump does when it comes to wars is he will threaten war, and he will do everything necessary to make it seem like he's actually going to do it. Like when he brought John Bolton to the negotiation table with North Korea, because John Bolton is known for following through on war threats, right? So he will do everything in his power to make the entire world believe that war is imminent in order to get these world leaders to capitulate. And what the U.S. government and the Trump administration is demanding that Nicolas Maduro step down and a legitimately elected leader is put in charge of the country. As Green says, you came back. I never left. I just took like about 2 weeks off, but I never left. And I've been back. This is like my third show back. But anyway, nevertheless. So Nicolas Maduro is refusing to step down. And because of this, it's basically putting Trump in a position where if you don't remove yourself, I'm going to come in and remove you. And hence the BBC headline there you see at the bottom, Trump says he authorized CIA in Venezuela as Maduro says no to regime change. Now, this whole CIA being authorized to operate in Venezuela, they've already been there. The only difference is now that the CIA that we have currently is basically under Patriot control, not deep state control. And these CIA operatives are some bad dudes. These were the guys that went in and basically overthrew Gaddafi. They overthrew what's his name? Hosni Mubarak in Egypt. They overthrew I can't remember the president's name in Ukraine in 2014, but they put in Poroshenko. And these are the guys. There's this one retired CIA agent that was doing interviews a long time ago, like back in the 80s and 90s. I cannot remember his name because that would allow you to go look it up. But he talked about how the CIA actually operates when it comes to regime change. Saddam, that's right, Tom. How they operate is what they will do is they will infiltrate the country. Then they will start internal strifes. They will pit gangs against each other. They will pit factions of the government against each other. They'll use all types of means and methods like blackmail, assassination, whatever they need to do, kidnapping, whatever they need to do to get these leaders to capitulate. Like, these are some bad dudes. And what would happen is at first they would approach the world leader and say, hey, we have control of your infrastructure. We have control of your military. We have control of your own security detail. And we can kill you. Yes, riots too, Barnes. Yep. And we can kill you. But we don't want to kill you. What we want to do is we want to replace you. So if you would quietly step down and concede power to whoever we choose to put in place, then we'll let you and your family live. We'll let you keep your wealth. You just got to go somewhere else and basically be banished from the kingdom, so to speak. If the leader refuses, then what they would do is they would organize large rallies and riots to destabilize the country internally. And if that doesn't work, then they will turn they'll use the civil unrest to turn it into a violent overthrow. And what that means is getting mobs and crowds to basically storm the Capitol, kill the government, kill the leader who's in charge, and put their own puppet in charge. That's the way they do it. And the third option is we will just assassinate you or make you disappear, and then we'll plug our man in. So it's either capitulate to the threats, get overrun by the mob, or get knocked off in an assassination. And those assassins, the hit teams basically that would be organizing and leading the riots that turn into a violent coup, or the ones that would carry out the direct assassination, Those guys are called, they call them the jackals. And the jackals are some bad dudes, but they're fiercely loyal to the federal government. So it doesn't matter who the president is or what the agenda is. As long as they get that order, they will follow that order to the T. So they're almost like super soldier kill bots, and they're loyal to whoever sets the program. Right? So when it was Obama and Bush and the deep state in charge of the White House, they were the ones setting the program. So they had the jackals under their control. So they were using the jackals for their own agenda. But now that Trump is in control and the Patriots are in control, they also have control of this weaponized arm of the CIA called the jackals. And Trump has now unleashed the jackals in Venezuela. And the mission of the jackals is to remove Maduro from power one way or another, whether they get him to leave willingly or they have to overthrow him by force. But either way, once the jackals are on the ground in your country, until the president of the United States calls them off, they will follow through with the mission. So Maduro is in some serious trouble right now, and the best thing he can do for himself is to step down. And the purpose of utilizing the CIA jackals is to avoid a full-scale military invasion and a full-on conflict. So while Trump is posturing, because that's all we're hearing in the mainstream media, right? That Trump is posturing with large military forces to invade, start bombing targets in Venezuela on the land and actually launch a boots on the ground invasion in Venezuela. But what we're not hearing about in the mainstream media is the jackals. And again, the mission of the jackals is to accomplish the objective without the use of the full force of the military. You see what happened with Saddam in Iraq and why we had to invade Iraq under Bush is because the jackals were unsuccessful. The jackals were in Iraq long before 9/11, and they were trying to get Saddam to step down. The same thing happened in Libya with Gaddafi. But here's the two fundamental differences. Iraq happened under Bush. After they pulled off 9/11, they got their pretext to invade the Middle East, get military forces and forward operating bases established in the Middle East. So they went in, they tore up Afghanistan and made their mark, made their footprint, set up shop. Then from there, they springboarded into Iraq with our U.S. military forces. And during that time, before 9/11 and during the war in Afghanistan, the jackals were in Iraq trying to turn the people against Saddam and trying to get Saddam to step down. But the people of Iraq would not turn against Saddam, and Saddam would not step down. So the full force of the military had to be used because the jackals failed their mission. Now, when it comes to Libya, it was slightly different, but it was the same playbook. In Libya, the jackals were already on the ground threatening Gaddafi. Gaddafi would not step down. This is why we were seeing the videos of Gaddafi doing rallies in the streets while people were cheering for him. But you let CNN and MSNBC tell the tale. They would have told you that Gaddafi was an evil dictator. The people of Libya hated him and wanted him out of power, which was totally not the case. It was, in fact, the complete opposite. And what that was for was to help support the jackals in their mission to turn the people of Libya against Gaddafi. But the people of Libya would not turn against Gaddafi, so the full force of military power had to be used to remove Gaddafi. And this is where the Libyan so-called freedom fighters came in. This was Al-Qaeda, the new generation of Al-Qaeda called, not Hamas, what the fuck were they called? ISIS. Sorry, I don't know how I had a brain fart. ISIS. So in this case, and this was done under Obama, because by the time Obama came around, the American people were tired of our military being used to support these regime change operations. And Obama knew that. So in order to maintain favorability with the American people, he used the proxy force of Al-Qaeda / ISIS to launched the military invasion of Libya to overthrow Libya. Then they tried it in Syria and all those other Middle Eastern countries. And that was all done in an effort to prop up the Rothschild banking system and keep Israel in power. But in this case, the jackals are not being used to prop up the Rothschild banking system. The jackals are actually being used for a noble cause, which is eliminating an actual evil drug dealing, human trafficking dictator. Because here's the thing. We were the people that wanted open borders, like the average Main Street Americans here in America. Like when I debated Brother Sanchez about the open borders in 2019, and he was all for it, right? Those types of people. They wanted those illegal aliens to flood into the country, and they were sold that horrible idea because they were sold the narrative that these people deserve to have a better life and they can make a better life for themselves and their families here in America. And a lot of bleeding heart liberals and lefties fell for that stupid shit, right? But what we, the conservatives, were saying was, well, if they want a better life, they can make a better life in their country. They just have to rid their governments of all the corruption that's been destroying their country. And if life is habitable for them in their own country, they would much rather stay in their own countries and make a better life for themselves in their own countries rather than have to leave their home to come to a foreign country and start from scratch just to quote unquote make a better life, right? So what do you think Trump's doing? Trump is actually cleaning up the corruption in their countries in order for these people to make a life for themselves in their own countries. So now that we see the CIA being deployed, you have to understand this is not the same version of the CIA that we're used to hearing about. Not the deep state CIA. This is the Patriot CIA. This is the jackals being used for what they're actually supposed to be used for, not being used for nefarious purposes to prop up the Rothschild banking system. So things are getting real interesting, and we're going to take a closer look at this war in Venezuela and this targeting of Venezuela. And of course, the Gitmo list. So we've been hearing about the Gitmo list for years, and now the Guantanamo Bay list, the Guantanamo list is becoming mainstream news. I found a tad bit of information on the Guantanamo list on Wikipedia now. You can find it, which I think is very interesting. And this comes after the first round of high-level targets were rendered to Guantanamo Bay, tried and executed. Now that that wave of targets have been executed, they're bringing in the new wave of targets, which are the cartel leaders, the gang bosses, and basically the convicted illegal aliens that are involved in drug and human trafficking. They are now being rendered to Guantanamo Bay, along with other high-level U.S. officials. And Russia, as tonight's topic says, the real war on drugs targets Venezuela. Russia confirms Gitmo list. Now, Russia has published what they call the Guantanamo list through their legislature, and it contains names of American government, high-ranking American government officials. And I find that to be extremely interesting that Russia, of all countries, has published the Guantanamo list because, again, until now, we've been hearing about the Gitmo list, but it's always been through back channels like mine, through Q, etc., right? But now it's gone mainstream thanks to the Russians. So when you hear all this news about the U.S. and Russia beefing and possibly going to war and all that, it's all fear-mongering because Trump and Putin are allies. And this publishing of the Gitmo list by Russia is actually another telltale sign that the U.S. and Russia are allied in this war on the deep state and not in opposition to one another. So we got some interesting stuff tonight. But before we get to all of that, Don't forget to go subscribe to the Citizen Man Backup channel. If you haven't subscribed to the Backup channel, please make sure you do. That's how you stay connected with me on YouTube in case they zap me over here on Citizen Man TV. Also, follow me on Rumble because any streams off YouTube that they zap, you will find the replay on Rumble. It's absolutely free. There's no paywall or anything like that. Just pure content. There's hundreds of videos on Rumble that are not available on YouTube thanks to the censorship. So if you really want to get a better look at, what Citizen Man does and the type of and the quality of content that I produce, get on over to Rumble and you can check out those previous streams, which would inevitably contain tons of information that will help you understand what's happening now. So, don't miss out on that great content, man. Get over to Rumble, y'all. If you haven't gone to Rumble yet, you're missing out. I'm telling you right now, you're missing out. And it's free. It costs you nothing. The Lost Book of Herbal Remedies. Get yourself a copy of The Lost Book of Herbal Remedies. Get back to nature, natural healing, metabolic cooking for the weight loss recipes, anabolic cooking for the muscle building recipes. All 3 books are linked in the description box of every video on YouTube and Rumble. And of course, last but not least, if you guys would like to support the show with your kind donations, you can do so via Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo by using the tag scrolling across the screen in the banner below. The links that are pinned to the top of the YouTube chat in the black box where it says Citizen Man TV in yellow. Just click the yellow. The box opens up and all the links are there. And you can also find those same links in the description box of every video on YouTube and Rumble where it says support the channel. Shout out to my brother Lee 14224 with the support on the PayPal. He says, have a great show. Appreciate you, brother Lee. And shout out to my sister Stacy on the Cash App. She says, thanks. Appreciate you, Stacy. Shout out to y'all for that support. So we got 2 supporters on the board so far. I'd like to get 10. So that means we'll need 8 more. So if you guys feel so inclined, please be sure to support the channel. All right, here we go. So Haley Hawk family this public school just deleted their entire account. Lucy Martinez teaches there. So this Charlie Kirk incident, like I said, it's exposing a lot of people and the evil in their hearts. And this is a woman that's a teacher at an elementary school, and she's basically making fun of Charlie Kirk's assassination. And she basically got the whole school to delete their social media account in order to cover up her reprehensible behavior. And this is why public school is such a terrible idea, because these are the people in charge of educating our children. These are some sick individuals. And it's funny how liberalism works so well on women. And the only men that liberalism really works on are effeminate men, because you literally have to be able to separate logic from reality in order to buy into liberal causes. Like, you literally have to do the mental gymnastics to accept contradicting ideas in order to comfortably call yourself a liberal. So just the mere fact that these people are left-wing and believe in that contradictory bullshit that they believe in lets you know that they already aren't right in the head. This is why we say liberalism is a mental disorder, because it's true. You literally have to be mentally retarded to say, have the government ban all guns and only let the government have the guns, but at the same time openly declare that you don't trust the government. You literally have to be mentally disabled to even function at that level. Shout out to Rhonda for the Cash App. She says 1. I don't know if that's a supporter count, Rhonda, but that would be 3 on the board. But nevertheless, but we all know this about the liberals. I don't have to get into that. I just thought I should show you guys that people are still, even in the face of all these people on social media losing their jobs and shit for making fun of Charlie Kirk, these liberals are still out there doing it, literally risking it all just to show their ass. because liberalism literally is a mental disorder, and that is not a joke. That is not a joke. But what is a joke is believing that Tyler Robinson actually shot Charlie Kirk and that Charlie Kirk is actually dead. That's a bit comical because we've done the examinations, we've looked at all the evidence. We've looked at all the evidence, and we've been able to comfortably conclude that the assassination of Charlie Kirk was more than likely a staged event. I mean, none of us were there, so we can't say for sure. But what we can say is it certainly was staged. Now, this is a statement from Tyler Robinson about the Charlie Kirk incident. And he says, "I didn't pull the trigger, but I know who did." Tyler Robinson breaks the silence in court. And what he says in the middle of the trial changes the entire Charlie Kirk case. In a chilling moment that freezes the courtroom, Tyler Robinson suddenly rises from his chair, his voice trembling but fierce. "I didn't pull the trigger, but I know who did. And it's time for the truth to come out." Robinson's bloodshot, defiant eyes are fixed on the camera as he speaks. His confession isn't just an emotional outburst, it's an explosion. He begins to describe shady encounters, veiled threats, and a chain of command that stretches far beyond him. Now that's interesting. "They promise to protect me," he says hoarsely, "but when things go wrong, they need someone to take responsibility." So essentially, he's now saying that he's just a patsy, just like Lee Harvey Oswald was saying in the Kennedy case right before he was shot. Robinson's violent outburst doesn't turn the case upside down, it blows it apart. For the first time, the world glimpses a hidden web of deception and the chilling possibility that the real killer has been hiding right in front of them all along. So basically, Tyler Robinson is confirming what we all have already concluded, right? That not to the point where we believe Charlie Kirk didn't die, but to the point of which we believe that there were other people involved. This was a conspiracy. And that I can believe. And what do you know? There is, in the Charlie Kirk case, the FBI have, the Department of Justice have put gag orders on 3,000 people in the Charlie Kirk assassination case. 3,000 people are under gag orders now from the Charlie Kirk assassination case. So when Tyler Robinson says this stretches way beyond him, he's not making it up. And there have been photographs of suspicious looking individuals within the crowd who appeared to have been carrying long guns on them that very day. So what I believe happened was something like what happened in that Don Cheadle movie when he was a terrorist and he had to organize the mass bombings of buses across DC, and he felt bad in the movie. So what he did was he instructed all the bombers to get on the same bus because they didn't know who each other was. So he put all the bombers on the same bus together and had them blow themselves up. Excuse me. I believe that the Charlie Kirk assassination, Charlie knew it was going to happen. The Department of Justice and the Trump administration helped him stage it, but it was set up in such a way that multiple assassins were ordered to carry out the hit and show up at that rally and be there that day. And when Charlie Kirk detonated the device in his shirt and faked his death, all the shooters basically panicked and ran off. So all the FBI had to do now was close their eyes and pick one, and we'll just run him through the news as the shooter while silently investigating the other individuals that showed up under the instructions of being shooters. So it was a mass sting operation, and that's a possible reason for why there's now over 3,000 people involved in that case. Because now you have several shooters, which means several networks of hit teams several networks of organization, but one source of orders. So, in essence, part of the Charlie Kirk incident was not only to save Charlie Kirk's life while pretending to have Charlie Kirk lose his life, which gets to hit the heat off of Charlie, but it also creates a trigger event to expose all the people who are involved in the networks that could possibly be involved in planning and carrying out future assassinations. It was basically a massive sting operation, just like the 2020 election was. I don't know if you guys realize this, but the Trump administration or Donald Trump himself is actually quite masterful at sting operations. So now that the walls are closing in on the deep state, their hit squads have been basically thinned out, and their force, their boots on the ground forces have been weakened. Now Donald Trump is aggressively going after these deep state players. And just like I told you guys in the beginning, Trump did not publicly announce that he was going after these people, even though he's silently going after them, because upon publicly announcing that he's going after these people, this would be the response from the deep state and their operatives, that Trump is going after his political opponents. That's what they're going to claim. Now, Senator Elizabeth Warren says the president of the United States is openly seeking revenge on his political opponents. We even had a similar statement put out by the Clinton Foundation, oddly enough. But I told you guys years ago that this would be their narrative. This would be the excuse that they use to try to claim that what Donald Trump is doing is so wrong. But so much has happened from the time I first said that they would use this talking point to the present time as they're using that talking point, that nobody believes that shit anymore, because now everybody is of the mutual understanding that Trump's political opposition are the corrupt bad actors within the government. So, of course, he has to go after his opposition if he's going after the corrupt bad actors in the government. Because if he's the guy that's going after the corruption and his opposition are the source of the corruption, then, of course, he's going to go after his political opposition. After all, in an effort to maintain and prop up their corruption, look at how aggressively they went after him. And this is why he allowed them to do all of that to him. Because once the general public saw them doing this to Trump with the lawfare and the fake indictments and the lawsuits and all that bullshit, once the general public accepted that this is acceptable behavior from political opposition to their political ops, Trump basically allowed them to set the standard. So now that the American people are accepting of weaponizing the justice system against your political enemies, as they did against Trump, now Trump is legitimately using the judicial system against his political enemies. But in the eyes of his political enemies, they're going to have to try to paint it as if he's weaponizing it against them. But it's very hard for them to make that claim after 10 years of them doing the exact same thing. So all the years we were saying, well, why doesn't Trump just go after these people? We got enough. We got enough dirt on them. We got enough evidence against them of their crimes. Why doesn't Trump go after them? Why is Trump allowing them to walk all over them? Well, that's because, again, Trump was allowing them to set the bar. So once he took office again, he could use that same bar to beat them to death with it. And that's exactly what he's doing. And now they're mad and their feelings are hurt because they're full of shit. And this is why the Democratic Party is led by women. This is why they act like that, because they're led by liberal women. And liberal-minded women are they're naturally narcissistic, where they want to be in control and they want to do all the bullshit to you. But if you dare stand up for yourself, you're now the bad guy. If you dare point out that they're wrong about something, they'll find a way to make it your fault that they're wrong. That's what they do. And this is why, even though Trump is doing nothing different than what the Democrats did to him, they're playing the victim. Because I can do it to you, but how dare you do it to me? And because, no offense to my women, because not all women are like this, but most are. Because the Democratic Party is led by feminist women and effeminate men, this is their mindset, this is their mentality, and this is how they can get on TV with a straight face and say all that bullshit and actually try to stand on that bullshit. This is why they're able to do that. Because in their minds, they don't see anything wrong with what they do. In their minds, they've done nothing wrong. And if anybody dares point out something wrong that they did, there's always a justification for it. This is exactly how the Democrats behave. This is exactly how they operate. And it's gotten to such a ridiculous point that the whole world sees it and nobody supports them. This is why they were so busy trying to rig elections and shit. Because they know ain't nobody voting for that dumb shit. This is why they wanted open borders and bring in the illegals and give them voting rights. Because they know Americans that can read and write and understand English are not going to go for that shit. Now, speaking of bitch assness, Netanyahu. So Trump made the peace deal between Israel and Gaza. And of course, in typical Zionist fashion, Israel strikes Gaza, violating the ceasefire. So while Trump was being praised for making the historic peace deal, Israel just basically shitted all over the peace deal, which I believe Trump knew that they would do. This is why he went forward with the peace deal and was being so nice to Netanyahu and doing all the ass kissing and shit. Because he knew that once the peace deal was made, Netanyahu would violate that peace deal, which would now give Trump the moral high ground to say, fuck Netanyahu, he's a piece of shit, and whatever happens to him, happens to him. And if China bombs the shit out of them, we're not going to help him. So basically, Trump afforded Netanyahu the opportunity to piss on the work that he did in making the peace deal, which inevitably Netanyahu has done. So now, when Trump actually pulls the plug on Israel, he has proper justification to where the Zionist media can't make any claims that what Trump is doing to Israel by leaving Israel, hanging Israel out to dry, is wrong. And I think that's a pretty good way to go about it, because that would mean even the conservatives who support Israel because of their religious beliefs, they too are going to start to see Israel for the scumbags that they are and stop supporting them. And this makes it perfectly clear that Israel has no interest in peace in the Middle East. So essentially what Trump is allowing Netanyahu to do is to establish himself as the source of all the discord in the Middle East, the source of the chaos in the Middle East. So now he can wash his hands, and what becomes of Israel becomes of Israel. And because it was the Israeli Mossad and the Zionist regime that were plotting the Charlie Kirk assassination, now because of that case, their entire hit squad network is under fire. So now Trump can pull the plug on Netanyahu without fear of losing his life, because the people who would be involved in orchestrating the taking of his life, those people will no longer be operational. So they can't touch him. Remember what Q said. Trump will be well insulated. And the reason why Trump has to be insulated is because these Zionists have infiltrated so deeply that they could be sitting at the table right with you and you wouldn't know. Yes, Netanyahu is descended from the Khazarians, yes. Excuse me. Rookie and S Green, I see you guys laughing. Did I tell a joke? I don't even remember. I might have. I don't know. But yes, Netanyahu, that's not even his real name. I think his real name is like Midkowitz or some shit like that. But he has an Eastern European name. And guess what? Eastern Europe is where the Khazars come from. So they're literally not real Jews. Now, Candace Owens has been on fire lately. And I believe that she knows that the Charlie Kirk assassination was a staged event, but it's her job to play it up as if it were a real event, because that's the way the movie script is supposed to go. She says, "Don't worry about the gag order in the Charlie Kirk case. I plan to violate it on the world's behalf. The things I've discovered this past week are enough to burn the house down. Yes, Charlie was betrayed by everyone." Right, because he was surrounded by Zionist regime operators, and those operators decided to conspire against him to take his life. I don't believe they succeeded. But as it's being projected to the public, they did succeed. So when we're going down the road of the Charlie Kirk assassination and we're talking about public perception, or we're talking from a perspective of public perception, we have to treat it as if it was a real event, because that's how it's being broadcast. But of course, if you know, it wasn't a real event. It was a staged event for a much larger purpose. Yes, Iron Effie, they're pushing for the Ben Gurion Canal. And the reason why is because they need to connect the excuse me. They need to connect the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea. And the reason for that, oh, you're laughing at the way I said bitch assness. Okay. Thank you, S Green. I didn't even realize I said that. I just kind of blurted it out and kept going. That's why you guys were laughing. I'm like, what did I say that was funny? Okay. I guess that's a hallmark of a true comedian, right? You're trying to be serious and you end up being funny anyway. Maybe I'm in the wrong business. I should be on stage telling jokes, apparently. And all the jokes would be about my life, because my fucking life is a goddamn comic book, I tell you. It's a comic book, and I feel like the villain that keeps getting his ass kicked. That's my life in a nutshell. But anyway, so damn it, I forgot what I was saying. Shit. Maybe I'm in the wrong business. Okay. And C. And the reason for that. Trying to get back to what I was saying. Connect the Indian Ocean. Oh, okay. I was talking about the Ben Gurion Canal. Got it. Okay. Right. Iron FE mentioned the canal, and I was talking about the Ben Gurion Canal. So the BRICS, all that reporting I was doing on the BRICS nations was for a reason. Because what the BRICS are doing is they're establishing the quantum financial system, which is an international trade system utilizing gold and precious metal-backed digital currency. Digital and physical currency, excuse me. But as long as the currency is backed by gold and precious metals, they cannot inflate the value of the money because the value of the money is based on these intrinsic metals, which the countries would be holding. So if they hold a certain amount of gold and precious metals, they can only print that much money, and that's the value of their money. So that puts all the nations that are trading amongst each other on an even keel, where no nation can devalue their currency, so they can raise prices on the other nation that they're trading with, that they're selling to, right? So what's happening with them wanting the Ben Gurion Canal is this. The Rothschild banking system is based in the fiat currency. The Rothschild banking system is the Zionist-controlled banking system that we're currently under. And they operate worldwide. This is the SWIFT system, the money wiring transfer system, the SWIFT. That's what that is. Now, what the BRICS is doing, and that all utilizes fiat currency. That means currency backed by nothing except government force. Will blow your country up if you don't use this money, basically. And so the BRICS nations switching to a gold-backed currency, a precious metals-backed currency, has incorporated Egypt into their alliance. And Egypt, being a BRICS nation, will now be doing business with gold-backed currency. So those ships that are coming from Asia, from the manufacturing centers in Asia, that are being shipped over to Israel and Europe through the Suez Canal, which is the only waterway north of the continent of Africa that connects the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea. That Suez Canal is owned and controlled by, or not owned, but it's in the control of Egypt. And if Egypt is only accepting transit fees, because these ships got to pay tolls when they go through there, the tolls are called transit fees. So if Egypt is only accepting transit fee payments in gold-backed currency, that means all those ships that are traveling from Asia to Europe and also to Israel, those supply ships, are not going to be able to pass through the Suez Canal, because if they're trying to pay the transit fees with fiat currency, but Egypt is a BRICS nation that uses gold-backed currency, their money will be as good as monopoly money. If you were to walk into Walmart and try to use monopoly money to make a purchase, you'll be denied the purchase. Which means, essentially, when the quantum financial system goes fully operational and all the BRICS nations are trading with gold-backed currency, the fiat currency nations like the European Union and Israel will be essentially isolated from the world trade markets. And the only way Israel and Europe can keep their economies going is if they destroy Gaza and they build their planned Ben Gurion Canal. Now, you can go to my Rumble page and go months back in the archives of my content page, and you will find a stream about the Ben Gurion Canal and why Israel is destroying Gaza. Because the area where Gaza is would be one of the entry/exit ports. And the other entry/exit port will be like in the southern side of Israel, where it connects to, I think that would be the Black Sea. I'm not sure what sea that is. But it connects to the Indian Ocean, basically. And if they can build and open the Ben Gurion Canal, that will open up their shipping lane, which means when the BRICS go fully operational with the quantum financial system, Israel and Europe will not be affected because they'll still have their fiat currency transit fee trade routes established. So what Trump is doing with Israel is he's playing nice with Israel because they got the hit teams running around. But at the same time, he's stalling their efforts to begin construction on the Ben Gurion Canal. That's the main focus, even more important than the lives of the people in Gaza. Because if the objective is to take down the Zionist regime and the Rothschild banking system and return the world to a free and fair trade market based in gold and precious metals backed currencies, you have to completely destroy Israel. And the only way to safely destroy Israel is to cut them off economically and starve them out. That's the only way. You see, their control of the banking system only gives them power because of our dependence on the banking system. But if we weren't so dependent on the banking system, then they wouldn't have that much power over us. Imagine how many people are scared to get on social media and say how they really feel. Why? Because they'll get fired from their job. Then they'll have their bank accounts frozen. And if their bank accounts are frozen, their life is over because their entire life revolves around that bank account. That's how they pay their bills. That's how they buy their food. That's how they keep a roof over their head to stay warm in the winter. So if they lose access to that, they're out of gas. There's literally nothing you can do. You're shit out of luck. So as long as they have control of the banking system, they'll always have control of the people. And the only way to get them to relinquish control of the banking system is to force them onto the same banking system as the rest of the world, which would be the quantum financial system with gold and precious metals backed currency. That way they lose total control of the banking system and free trade can actually commence. And it's unfortunate what has to happen to the people of Gaza in the meantime, but I think Trump has made it pretty clear by now that if the rest of the world were to intervene in stopping Israel kinetically, America wouldn't get involved. Because now that Netanyahu has violated the peace deal, Trump's peace deal, he basically violated Trump. This was basically a fuck you to Trump. And Trump ain't the type of guy you could just say fuck you to and walk away. Trump will buy your house and evict your ass. So, on the heels of China making such a bold threat to Israel about making Israel no longer exist if they touch any of the Chinese aid ships, it's inevitable that Netanyahu, now that he feels emboldened because Trump ain't going to do nothing to him for violating the peace deal, he's going to continue attacking the aid ships, and China will eventually intervene and destroy Israel and wipe them off the map. And when that starts to happen, there'll be a huge outcry from the Christian conservatives that believe in the Zionist regime. And they're going to say, Trump, you need to help the poor Israelis. And you know what's going to happen? All that footage of the poor Palestinians in Gaza that were getting killed is going to start to circulate even more. And people are going to start to realize, like, oh, they're just getting a taste of what they gave to those people. Okay, fuck them then. And again, Trump can now lean on the fact that Netanyahu violated the peace deal, so there's nothing he can do. All he can do now is wash his hands. So two things had to be accomplished. One, the hit squads here in the United States had to be put on the radar and at the very least identified and located, if not neutralized completely. And the second thing that had to happen is Netanyahu pretty much had to spit directly in Trump's face, which he now essentially has done. So now that those two pieces are in place, the third piece would be military intervention against Israel, which I believe is going to come a lot quicker. You know, it's going to come sooner than later. Because the only reason why, even though the UN found Netanyahu to be a war criminal, he's been banned in several countries, a whole bunch of countries that were doing business with Israel, cut ties with Israel and all that. The only reason why America hadn't done anything, or the rest of the world hadn't done anything, is because they were afraid that if they were to attack Israel, America would attack them. And the reason why America would attack them is because the hit teams basically have the country held hostage. So Trump had to get rid of the hostage takers before he can operate fully freely without the threat of death hanging over his head or his family's head, and allow the rest of the world to intervene in the Israel situation without being forced to intervene on behalf of Israel. So Netanyahu has essentially isolated himself and given Trump probable cause to cut ties. And I believe that's the next move. But the canal was basically to give themselves, or at least allow themselves to maintain control of the banking system. But if the canal doesn't happen, they lose control of the economic system. So, just for the record, the 2020 election was massively stolen, mostly through Smartmatic and the stupid voting machines. Yeah, because the voting machines were flipping votes. People were voting for Trump, and the machines were flipping the votes for Biden. And it was so terrible that the fraud was so terrible that YouTube actually started removing videos that were exposing the election fraud. And it wasn't until Trump's lawyers or Trump's people started accusing YouTube of election interference and the threat of possibly being federally charged for election interference. It wasn't until that talk came about that YouTube decided to stop censoring people for talking about the election. But Jan Martini says, I'm sharing this with all of you. This is the actual results of the election. People in Germany saw this before Dominion servers were seized. That's when these Army Green Berets, I believe it was, Special Forces, raided the Seidel server site in Frankfurt, Germany, and a shootout between Army Special Forces and CIA Black Ops happened there, and several individuals were taken into custody. And the Army took control of the servers and were able to find the real vote numbers. This will probably get removed, so share as much as possible. The fraud is massive. Shame on these people. And this is the real election results. This is why the election map looked the way it looked, but somehow Biden won. Because it was all election fraud. Trump won 410 electoral votes and Biden won 128. And that's more reflected in public opinion. Excuse me. Way more people, if they don't fully support Trump, at least they understand that Trump is a better choice for the country than Biden was. That's right. Knowledge. Yeah, the Ben Gurion Canal. And speaking of Brother Sanchez, he's of the opinion, and I debated him on this topic too. He's of the opinion that people shouldn't vote. I beg to differ, because if you look at the known enemies of the people, their main tool of control is the government, the political system. So there's literally no way to defeat these controllers if you choose to ignore the weapon that they're using. That's like if a dude's trying to rob you, he's trying to stick you up, and you attack him to defend yourself, but you don't grab the gun. That's what that's like. So when Sanchez is telling you, you know, we need to be in opposition to the system and we need to resist the system, but ignore the political system, he's essentially basically telling you, hey, the system is the armed robber that's sticking you up and we need to whoop his ass. But don't worry about that gun that he's holding because the gun ain't real. That's essentially what he's telling you. And I don't agree with that because if our enemy is using the political system, which essentially in that metaphor would be the gun, to control us, then the gun is what we need to take control of. So if they're using our political system to control us, then we, the people, have to find a way to retake control of our political system. And if you don't believe your vote counts because of the fraud, that should be more motivation to vote. And here's why. Because if your vote doesn't count because of like what happened in 2020, look how many people voted for Trump, but Trump still lost the election. So those people, instead of becoming discouraged, they decided to use their votes as evidence that there was fraud. Because if all of us vote for one guy, but the other guy somehow mysteriously wins, our votes now serve as a counterbalance to show that he did not legitimately win. So there's still grave importance on the people casting their ballots. Aside from that, if enough people cast their ballots one way, no matter how much fraud they put in place to make sure the other guy wins, the other guy is going to lose because the overwhelming support will overshadow the fraud. And this is what happened in 2016. We knew the fix was in. We knew the 2016 election was rigged because a week before Election Day, Newsweek published a magazine edition with Hillary Clinton on the cover and called it Madam President because they knew that the fix was in. They knew that the fraud was ready. They knew how many votes they had programmed in the machines to flip for Hillary. But what happened that they didn't plan for was the 15% first-time voter turnout. That 15% first-time voter turnout is what caused the election fraud to be overridden by the legitimate votes of the people. This is why come 2020, in order to make sure Trump doesn't get in, not only were they flipping the votes in the electronic voting machines, but they were doing ballot dumps of multiple duplicate ballots of Biden votes. And at the same time, they were discarding and not deliberately not counting Trump votes. So they had to commit so much fraud that they couldn't hide it because they were afraid that what happened in 2016 would happen again in 2020. But Trump took action, used 2020 as a sting operation, got rid of all the bad actors, set up military monitoring of the election since 2018. And the people who needed to be taken into custody were taken into custody and replaced. And come 2024, we actually had our first legitimate election in probably our entire lives since Kennedy. And Trump won by a landslide. Yeah, knowledge. I showed pictures. If you go back to my 2021 streams in early 2021 where I was talking about the election, you might find them here on Rumble. Over on Rumble. My 2021 streams where I talked about the election fraud, I showed pictures of the ballots being dumped in landfills, the Trump votes. They were semi-truckloads of Trump votes being dumped in landfills, dumped on the side of the road. Then I showed the pictures of the Democrat operatives in these Democratic cities bringing in boxes and duffel bags full of ballots to add to the count. Shout out to my sister Cherokee for the Cash App. And shout out to my sister Rhonda. I did shout out Rhonda. But shout out to Cherokee. She says $5 holla. Good show. Appreciate you, Cherokee. That makes 4, y'all. We got 4 supporters. We need 6 more. We need 6 more. And shout out to DJ Spin and Jabberjaw over on Rumble. Shout out to y'all. But it's now coming out publicly how rigged the 2020 election was, because those bad actors have now been removed from the scene. "27 Colorado Democrats vote against making," hold on. Okay, yeah, that's the right way. "Vote against making indecent exposure to minors a felony, citing concern the law could ban drag shows for kids." So in these Democratic states, in case you were wondering why they're so into sexualizing kids with this rainbow shit, that's because the Democratic Party is ran by the international Masons, who don't require you to have a God, which means they don't require you to have a moral compass in order to join. So they're all in favor of the do as thou wilt. And because birds of a feather flock together, all of these pedophiles and these perverts, they all get together and they decide to target children, because it's hard to turn adults into perverts. It's hard to take a 30-year-old man who's a straight man and get him to be gay. It's not that easy, but it's much easier to take an 8-year-old boy and get him to believe that he likes males and get him to think that being with other males is natural and normal. So they're essentially attacking humanity. Homosexuality is a direct attack on humanity. And they're attacking humanity because even though their secret society doesn't require them to have a God per se, they do still have a God. Their God is just Satan. And the greatest trick Satan ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. So while they run around calling themselves atheists and, people who don't believe in God, they support everything satanic, which means Satan is their God, and they don't even acknowledge it. They don't even know it. Because you see, the importance of having a theological belief in a supreme being more powerful than yourself, the reason why that's important for humans is because the idea of an intelligent creator it's coupled with the idea of certain laws and rules and parameters set in place to maintain the creation. And those rules, laws, and parameters would be essentially your moral compass. So having a belief in a grand creator naturally gives you a moral compass, which means you differentiate what's righteous from what's evil. But when you don't have a belief in a supreme creator and you believe in everything happened by coincidence, then what happens is you remove that moral compass from your thought pattern. So now things that based on the moral compass would be considered evil and reprehensible, because that moral compass does not exist in your thinking, there is no category of evil or reprehensible. So all things that are evil now can be construed as good. This is why the Bible says they would call good evil and call evil good. And this is why the Democratic Party is so bought into the sexual perversion when it comes to the kids, because they're a bunch of pedophiles. And they're trying to make life easier. They've infiltrated politics. They voted for their representation to put them into power. And now the people that represent them, because the perverts vote, now we have a bunch of pervert sympathizers in the legislature that are trying to pass laws to make it easier for these perverts to prey on our children. You see? So once again, another example of enemies of the people utilizing the political system to weaponize it against members of society, innocent members of society. So when I sit back and I look at things like this that are happening in the country and are being done legislatively, it's hard for me to get on board with Brother Sanchez's position of don't vote, politics is all a show, don't believe it, don't get involved. You know what I'm saying? It's hard for me to not get involved because our enemies are neck deep into politics, and that's why the systems become so corrupt. Because the good people are being taught that it's not worth getting involved in. So that leaves the door open for the bad people to step in and take over the shit. So from my perspective, anybody that would tell you to ignore the politics, which is the enemy's greatest weapon against you, I now have to look at that person as a servant of those very enemies. Because if they're the guy telling you, yeah, attack the armed robber and defend yourself, but don't grab that gun and try to take it from them, they want you to die. They want you to get shot because they're instructing you to do something that's to your own detriment. They can't be your friend. They have to be your enemy because they're giving you ill advice that will lead to your inevitable defeat. They're telling you let the enemy have free reign over the political system, which is their greatest weapon against us. During COVID, who was it on the TV telling people to wear masks and shit? Wasn't it the government? People in elected positions that were doing that were telling that lie? And in places where they weren't doing that, weren't those elected officials that were reopening the schools and not enforcing mask orders and shit? So the evidence couldn't be more clear that the political system is our enemy's greatest weapon against us, and anybody that tells you to ignore the political system is your enemy because they're advising you to do something that's clearly in favor of your enemies. Because if you attack that armed robber but you don't grab the gun, you're giving him the green light to shoot your ass. So you're helping him. So anybody that would advise you to do that would be advising you to do something that works in the robber's favor, because now that you're shot and incapacitated, now he can run your pockets and take all your shit and ain't a goddamn thing you can do about it. Because your ass is shot. And what's crazy to me is how so many people agree with his position while simultaneously, day in and day out, complaining about what it is the government is doing, but refuse to get involved in government. Don't let them fool you, man. Don't let them trick you out your freedom. Don't let them trick you out of your power. Now, this is an interesting tidbit. It's a little off subject, but it has to do with the Masonic connections to this war on the deep state, the American Masons versus the international Masons, right? So I read the excerpts from Wikipedia to you guys a couple of shows ago about the American Masons versus the international Masons. Now, this is just a tad bit of real world proof that there is a lot of Masonic symbolism and masonry involved in government and in military. In case anybody was doubting it or thinking it was conspiracy theory, here is an organization called Operation Double Eagle. Transfer your military skills. Operation Double Eagle is free for veterans and service members and, I guess, military personnel or whatever it says there. But it has to do with U.S. military, U.S. veterans, and it's called Double Eagle. But the logo is one eagle looking in one direction, right? Well, here's some Freemasonic symbolism And that is the double eagle right there, ladies and gentlemen. The double eagle is a Masonic symbol. And again, I'm not a Mason, so I'm not exactly sure what it stands for and what it represents, but because it's a two-headed eagle looking in both directions, it probably stands for something pertaining to, controlling both sides, seeing both perspectives, operating in both realms. As above, so below, the spiritual and the physical, good and evil, the checkerboard, black and white, that type of shit. But it's funny that organization is called Operation Double Eagle, and in Masonic symbolism, there is an actual double eagle. And you see how in Operation Double Eagle, their eagle is looking in one direction, whereas the Masonic eagle is two heads looking in both directions. So if you look at the duality and consider it good and evil on one side, good on the other side, then this organization right here has to be one or the other, good or evil. And it seems to be an American military organization. And again, the first American military was formed through the American Masonic lodges. It was a Masonic war. The death warrants that the king had for the founders and the signers of the Declaration of Independence to execute those arrests was the reason why the British soldiers touched down on American soil in the first place, because their job was to arrest those signers and render them to England to stand trial before the king so they can then be put to death. Because in Masonry, when you violate the orders of the Grand Master, allegedly the punishment is death. So instead of surrendering and willingly going, they decided to fight back and defend themselves. Hence, we had the War of 1776 and America was founded. So when you see Operation Double Eagle and it's a strictly American organization and the eagle is looking in one direction, that means this is an American Masonic organization, and it's a patriot organization, and they're not with that one world government bullshit. They believe in God and they have a moral compass, and they're trying to do what's right and what's righteous for the people. So whenever you see the Masonic symbolism, you can't think in terms of Masons versus non-Masons. You got to think in terms of Masons versus Masons, American Masons versus international Masons, because that's the secret war behind the scenes. That's the gentleman's war. So yeah, all our politicians might be Freemasons, but they're not all on the same side. Some are international Freemasons that lean liberal and believe in Aleister Crowley's "Do as Thou Wilt" and all the satanic debauchery, and the other half are American Masons that believe in God and have a moral compass and understand right from wrong, good from evil, and are "Do as God wilt," not as thou wilt, because thou art not God. You feel me? So that's just to put things in perspective for you so you can understand the Masonic side of things. Now, another thing that Brother Sanchez does that I feel is a bit deceptive, because he knows this. He's a Mason. He knows this. When he talks about the politicians and their involvement in Freemasonry, he sells it to you the way the infiltrators would want you to see it. He sells it to you in such a way that they're all Masons, so that automatically means they're all on the same side. When I literally showed you guys literature on the international Masons versus the American Masons. These are real factions that really exist, and they're really at odds with one another. So aside from Brother Sanchez telling you to ignore the enemy's greatest weapon against the people, which is the political system, he also sells you the idea that all the people in the political system that are involved in Masonry are all on the same side, when they're not. They're not. And this is reflected in their public policy decisions. As you can see, the Democrats want pedophilia, and the Republicans want pro-life, pro-human, pro-family. Now, There's been a lot of slander against Trump in the media recently. And I find that to be very interesting, considering the fact that they're also trying to play up the narrative of Trump going after his political enemies, right? They're not really telling you who these enemies are and why Trump is going after them. They're just playing the victim, saying Trump's going after his political enemies, which there's no other term for it, but that's some bitch shit. That's some straight bitch shit. You know, you do all this crooked evil shit and you get a patriot in office that's utilizing the power of the federal government to get rid of your corrupt ass, and you're acting like he's the bad guy. That's some bitch shit. That's like those women that get caught cheating on their man, and when they get caught cheating on their man, the first thing they do is justify it by saying they cheated because their man wasn't doing this and their man wasn't doing that. That's what that is. It's the same mentality. But part of the slander against Trump has been the him being on the Epstein list, on in the Epstein files. And I already told you, if Trump is in the Epstein files, he's mentioned as a witness for the prosecution in Epstein's prior criminal case. But William Barr, who has shown himself to not be exactly a friend of President Trump, but more of an enemy of President Trump, has come out publicly and said former AG Bill Barr testified under oath today that President Trump is in no way implicated in the Epstein files, and if he was, Biden would have leaked it. That narrative is now out the window, as Barr would absolutely take down Trump if he could. And William Barr, I believe, was the Attorney General at the time Epstein was arrested. Am I right about that, or am I wrong about that? Let me ask Google. Was William Barr AG when Epstein was charged? Let's see. Yes, William Barr was the Attorney General when Epstein was charged with federal crimes in July 2019. So that means if William Barr was the Attorney General, he would have had access, full, unfettered access, or whatever the word is, uninterrupted access, unsupervised access to the Epstein files. So for William Barr to testify under oath that Trump is not implicated in the Epstein files, well, his word actually carries more weight than some asshole, some blue-haired dick-sucking asshole on YouTube. So all that talk about Trump being in the Epstein files, William Barr just torpedoed all of that shit. So William Barr confirms what I've been saying the whole time. Trump is not in the Epstein files, and it's a goddamn lie. And anybody trying to sell you that lie is your enemy, because you don't lie to your friends, you lie to your enemies. That's why when you teach your kids the importance of telling the truth, you teach them the importance of telling you the truth, but you also teach them the importance of having to lie to the police from time to time. At least I did. I don't know if that's how your life went, but that's how my life went. So there it is. So my kids know you don't lie to daddy, but you lie to the police. Because the police are your enemies and you lie to your enemies. And the only reason why they're your enemies, not because they want to kill you because you're black and none of that bullshit. They're your enemies because they have an agenda, and their agenda is to get you in handcuffs and put you in a cell for whatever reason they can make up. So your freedom and your liberty taking that away from you is their priority. So they're your enemies, because anything you say that they can use to lock you up, they will use it and lock you up. So they're your enemies. So if you have to lie so they can't use the truth against you to lock you up, then you tell that lie. Your friends don't lie to you. Your enemies do. And for William Barr to come out and say Trump is not in the Epstein files, that is huge news. But of course, it's not going to be reported, so I'm going to post it on my community tab because the world needs to see that. So Q mentioned Trump using the military to take down senior officials within the government, right? The FBI arrested Ashley Tellis, a senior advisor at the Department of State and a contractor within the Department of Defense, for allegedly removing over 1,000 pages of classified national defense information from government facilities and storing them in his home. This arrest should serve as a stark warning to anyone thinking about undermining national security. The FBI and our partners will do everything within our power to find you and hold you accountable. So the FBI is announcing high-profile arrests. Now let's look at some more stuffs. So this one is an interesting headline, right? And we'll get to the Venezuela war right after this slide, in fact. Donald Trump seeks $230 million in compensation for past federal investigations. So Donald Trump is suing the federal government for all the bullshit the Democrats did. And I think he's going to win. I believe he's going to win. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? Because how can the president sue the federal government? That's insane. But not only that, Trump being compensated $230 million from the federal government is Trump seeking $230 million from taxpayers. Now, this is supposed to be the people's president, so that's not a good look. But here's why I support it. I support it because, one, after all the shit that man's been through to be president, he has not taken a presidential salary. Two, he sacrificed 75% of his personal wealth during his first term as president just to get his foot in the door and start to address this corruption that we've all been complaining about. So I can't help but appreciate him for that. And three, I don't think he's going to keep that $230 million for himself. I think he'll either donate it to a noble cause or he'll disperse it amongst the American people. And if we're paying tax dollars into the system and we know that the system isn't corrupt and those tax dollars are going where they're supposed to go, I fully support it. So, in other words, my support for Donald Trump's effort to seek compensation from the federal government for the lies and the false investigations on him, I would support it if he did what I believe would be the right thing with the money, which would be to return the money to the people. But if he kept the money for himself, I would say it's a greed move and it's no different than the deep state and stealing from the American people, which I don't believe Trump has any interest in doing. So as of now, I have to lean in favor of his effort. But depending on what he does with the money will determine whether I continue to support that effort or not. And I think that's a fair assessment. U.S. Naval Special Forces are increasing their operations off the coast of Venezuela. So shit is heating up with Venezuela. We're hearing more and more rumors of wars with Venezuela. But I don't think that Venezuela is going to be that big of a problem, because once Trump starts flexing his muscles and showing the force he has and the power he has over Venezuela, Maduro is going to capitulate. I firmly believe that Maduro, I see total capitulation in Maduro's future. Let me just say that. So Operation Southcom is the operation that's targeting, that has Venezuela in the crosshairs. This is all being done under United States Southern Command. So what units fall under Southcom? Southcom units include service components, joint task forces, and other organizations that carry out missions in Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. The main components are the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps forces, along with Special Operations Command South. So the Joint Special Operations Command is handling domestic operations here in the United States through the National Guard and whatnot. And in the real war on drugs, the Special Operations Command South is handling that entire operation. Other units include Joint Task Force Bravo, Joint Task Force Guantanamo, and Joint Interagency Task Force South. Okay. The service components: U.S. Army South provides Army forces for operations in the region and supports humanitarian and disaster relief efforts. Air Forces Southern, the Air Force component responsible for command and control of air activity and airlift in the area. And the Air Force, now this is me saying this, the Air Force's involvement is important because they are providing the transport to the Supermax prison in El Salvador and the brand new facility at Guantanamo Bay that Trump had built in 2018. And I think construction was completed in 2019. U.S. Naval Forces Southern Command, U.S. 4th Fleet, the Navy component that executes naval missions. U.S. Marine Corps Forces South, the Marine Corps component responsible for marine activity in the area. Special Operations Command South provides the theater contingency response force for special operations and works to counter threats. Joint and Interagency Task Forces. Joint Task Force Bravo, a subordinate command responsible for operations in Central America. Its units include the Army Forces Battalion and the 1st Battalion, 228th Aviation Regiment. Joint Task Force Guantanamo provides support for operations at the U.S. Naval Base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And of course, Joint Task Force Guantanamo is also responsible for housing the detainees that are taken into custody by the U.S. military. Joint Interagency Task Force South works to counter drug trafficking and other threats in coordination with other agencies. Other units and organizations. Now, these are all the components of Southcom. Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation provides training to military and civilian personnel from the Americas. Naval Small Craft Instruction and Technical Training School offers training in small craft operations and tactics. Inter-American Air Forces Academy provides Air Force specific training to personnel from partner nations. Okay. So that's basically the operational force that's dealing with the Southcom operation. Now, what's been happening is the U.S. military forces have been aggressive against the cartels and the drug smugglers. And this New York Times article here actually gives a bit of an outline of the timeline of these operations. U.S. attacks more boats as tensions with Venezuela rise. What's happened so far? And this article was published on October 21st. So that was yesterday. The Trump administration is ratcheting up pressure on the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, while striking vessels that it says are trafficking drugs. Tensions between the United States and Venezuela continue to escalate as the U.S. military keeps attacking boats in the ocean that it says are suspected of smuggling drugs for cartels and criminal gangs. The Trump administration has labeled terrorists. The administration expanded its operation this week, striking a vessel in the Pacific Ocean that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth claimed on social media was smuggling illegal narcotics along a known route. Citing specific intelligence, Mr. Hegseth said that the 2 people killed aboard were terrorists. It was the 8th known strike the U.S. military has conducted since early September, when President Trump ordered troops to begin targeting boats believed to be smuggling drugs. Before the latest strike, which took place Tuesday night, all of the boats that were hit had been in the Caribbean Sea. The administration has defended the strikes as acts of self-defense following Mr. Trump's declaration that the United States was in a state of war with drug cartels that he had also designated as terrorist groups. The Trump administration has focused its rhetoric on President Nicolas Maduro, the authoritarian leader of Venezuela, who was indicted on drug trafficking charges in the United States in 2020. President Trump has authorized CIA operations in Venezuela, and the administration is weighing land strikes as some of his aides push to oust Mr. Maduro. Also, there's I believe there's a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head on his capture. So any contractors out there that want to go get a piece of that 50 million, well, Maduro's your man. Go get him. But the boat attacks have not been limited to Venezuelan targets, and turbulence over them is spreading to other countries, especially Colombia. Here's the latest on the U.S. military operations. What's the latest on the attacks? And I hate that they call President Trump Mr. Trump. That is so fucking disrespectful. On President Trump's orders, the U.S. military began attacking vessels in the Caribbean in early September. The Trump administration has maintained that the operations have taken place in international waters and that the passengers were members of drug cartels who it says were trafficking narcotics. It has cited intelligence but not offered evidence of its accusations. By official estimates, the 8 strikes have killed 34 people so far. September 2nd, the first strike on a boat killed 11 people, according to Mr. Trump. He said they were members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, which his team has deemed terrorists. U.S. officials later said the boat appeared to have turned around before the attack. September 15th, a second strike killed 3 people, according to President Trump, who called them narco terrorists from Venezuela, but did not identify a specific group. President Gustavo Petro of Colombia later said one was a Colombian fisherman and accused the United States of murder. Yeah, of course they're going to accuse the United States of murder because bombing their dope boats is stopping their cash flow. So they have to find a way to defend the dope boats in order for them to keep the cash flow going. President Trump announced that the military had attacked a third boat in the Caribbean, killing 3 people without providing details. The authorities in the Dominican Republic later said they recovered cocaine. Of course they did. It's a dope boat. In a 4th strike, the military killed 4 men. Mr. Petro later said the boat had been carrying Colombian citizens. So what if they were Colombian citizens? Just because they were Colombian citizens does not mean they were not smuggling dope. Motherfucker. And this is how you know what world leaders are involved in drug trafficking. Because if they're mad about the drug traffickers being stopped by the U.S. military, then that means they had money invested in those drug operations and they're losing money too. Because what world leader that wants the best for his country would be upset about drug smuggling boats being bombed? Like just think about it logically, just on its face. Yeah, Barnes. Now they're saying we're violating maritime law, and they want Trump impeached over it. Well, guess what? They can't impeach him over it because it's on international waters. So there ain't a fucking thing they can do. In the fifth strike, the military killed 6 people in international waters, but just off the coast of Venezuela, according to President Trump. Relatives of a 26-year-old from Trinidad and Tobago said he and a neighbor were killed in the attack. Well, he and the neighbor was smuggling dope. That's why they ass got killed. They should have stopped and got arrested. They would have been alive. The sixth strike targeted a semi-submersible vessel, killing 2 people. Mr. Trump later said, or President Trump later said, the Navy rescued 2 survivors and repatriated them to Colombia and Ecuador. In the seventh strike, the military killed 3 men accused of smuggling drugs for a Marxist insurgent group in Colombia known as the ELN, which the State Department designated as terrorists in 1997. The eighth strike against a boat in the Pacific, October 21st, off the coast of Colombia, killed 2 people, Mr. Hexit said. He claimed that the 2 people aboard were carrying illegal narcotics along a known smuggling route. It was the first strike to target a boat outside the Caribbean Sea. Why is Trump taking military action in international waters? The Trump administration has justified the boat attacks as a matter of self-defense at a time of high overdose deaths in the United States. President Trump and his advisors have focused their rhetoric and the attacks at sea on Venezuela, where the administration is also considering options for a land strike or a targeted operation against the country's president, Mr. Maduro, who it calls a drug cartel leader. But the surge in overdoses in the United States has been driven by fentanyl, which comes from Mexico. South America is instead a source of cocaine, much of which originates in Colombia. Well, the same routes that they used to bring the fentanyl into the country are the same routes they used to bring the cocaine into the country. And in case you guys might have missed it, Trump has already got military forces operating in Mexico. So he's already going after the fentanyl traffickers. Before the latest strike, the administration had moved a large amount of naval firepower into the Caribbean. Far greater than this commensurate with the task. Far greater than this is commensurate with what? With the task of destroying small boats. The strike in the Pacific Ocean, where Venezuela has no coastline, suggested that the Trump administration's operations might have been broadening. Proponents of a regime change operation in Venezuela include Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the CIA Director John Radcliffe. How has Venezuela responded? Now, this is where it gets interesting. Mr. Maduro has called the strikes a heinous crime and a military attack on civilians who were not at war and were not militarily threatening any country. Well, if you're bringing dope into the country, you are militarily threatening America because you're threatening to poison Americans. He said that if the United States believed that boat passengers were drug traffickers, it should arrest them. Well, the problem with that, Mr. Maduro, you asshole, is you can't arrest the motherfuckers if they won't stop. You have to fucking stop them. And it's very hard to stop a boat because a boat is not restricted to a set path of travel like a car would be on a road, where you could just throw down a spike strip and then the car would have all its tires punctured and inevitably come to a stop. It don't work like that with boats. So you got to bomb the motherfuckers. So if you would prefer for your drug traffickers, your drug mules to be arrested, Mr. Maduro, you should advise them that when they're ordered to stop by the U.S. military, they should fucking stop so they can be arrested, you dumbass. Because the last time I checked, all the footage of the boats being blown up were boats that were on the move at a very high rate of speed. They were not boats that were stopped and stationary in the water getting bombed. They were boats that were on the run getting bombed. So Maduro, if you believe they should be arrested, then you should advise them to stop so they don't get their asses blown the fuck up. But you see, that's that bitch shit where we could do whatever we want, but you're wrong for exacting consequences. It's that bitch shit. Because Maduro's a bitch. Mr. Maduro has also warned that he will respond to any U.S. military action with an armed fight. In mid-October, his administration said it had launched a broad military mobilization and started training civilians for defensive combat against a potential U.S. invasion. Yeah, they're not going to stand a chance, by the way. They will not stand a fucking chance. Are the attacks legal? Yes, the fucking attacks are legal because the United States has been in a state of declared war since 9/11, and that state of declared war has never been rescinded. So the president has full autonomy and control of the military. So are the attacks legal? Yes. But of course, these assholes are going to, at New York Times, are going to try to make it seem like it's not. A broad range of specialists in the laws governing the use of force have disputed the Trump administration's contention that it can lawfully kill people suspected of drug trafficking if they were enemy troops in a war, or as if they were enemy troops in a war. The United States has traditionally dealt with maritime drug smuggling as a law enforcement matter, including Coast Guard interdictions. The Trump administration has asserted that the killings are legal. In a letter to Congress after the first strike, Mr. Trump justified it as self-defense. In a notice to Congress about the September 15 strike, the White House said President Trump had determined that the United States was now in a formal armed conflict with drug cartels that his team has deemed terrorist organizations. The administration has resisted requests that it provide a legal theory or analysis that supports its conclusion that the situation qualified as an armed conflict, including how it is bridging the conceptual gap between drug trafficking crimes and armed hostilities. Well, that's because the drug cartels have full-fledged militaries and military-style weapons. So they are armed combatants. Does Trump need Congress's approval? Congress has not authorized any armed conflict with drug cartels. Apart from whether it is lawful lawful to summarily kill those suspected of smuggling drugs, the question of whether or when any president needs congressional authorization for military operations is notoriously murky and the subject of frequent dispute. Under both parties, the Justice Department has opined that a president as commander-in-chief may carry out limited strikes in the national interest or on his or her own, so long as the anticipated nature, duration, and scope fall short of war in the constitutional sense. As one-off strikes evolved into lengthier military campaigns, however, pressure to obtain congressional approval tends to mount. The War Powers Resolution of Vietnam-era law says presidents must end deployments in congressionally authorized hostilities after 60 days. So now they're making it an issue of whether Donald Trump needs congressional approval. But the fact is, he doesn't. Because as long as the United States is in a state of declared war, as we've been, since 9/11, Donald Trump does not need any congressional approval for any military actions whatsoever. Now, that article did mention that Maduro was mobilizing military forces and civilian militia forces against the United States if they were to invade. So let's see what military.com has to say about this. It says military, and this article was from October 20th, 2 days ago. The 10,000 U.S. troops now operating in the Caribbean were sent to interdict drug boats. But Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's September 30th state of external emergency fundamentally changed what they were facing. A military on full wartime alert, equipped with Russian air defenses and anti-ship missiles, backed by what Maduro claims is a militia of over 8 million members. For American commanders, that means every operation and incident now happens under the threat of Venezuelan retaliation, in a situation the current force is not ready to handle. What? I have to sign up for this stupid shit. Hang on. Let's see if I can get this full article. Okay, this is too fucking much. Fuck this. All right, fuck this article. So the next article is from the BBC, and it's about the jackals. Trump says he authorized CIA in Venezuela as Maduro says no to regime change. So authorizing the CIA to operate in Venezuela is basically Trump turning the jackals loose on Maduro. U.S. President Donald Trump has authorized the CIA to conduct covert operations inside Venezuela. Let me close that tab. Close that tab. Inside Venezuela, provoking outrage from the South American nation's leader. The U.S. has conducted at least 5 strikes on suspected drug-carrying boats in the Caribbean in recent weeks, killing 27 people. U.S. Air Force B-52 bombers also circled over the Caribbean Sea on Wednesday for several hours. Trump has said the U.S. is looking at land and eyeing more strikes on drug cartels in the area. The flurry of action came as top U.S. military leader in the region announced his sudden retirement. Yeah, he's retiring because shit's getting real and he don't want to be a part of it. Nicolas Maduro, whose legitimacy as Venezuela's president is internationally contested, has appealed for peace with the U.S. He addressed the people of the United States in the television address saying, "No war, yes peace." Speaking at the White House, Trump said he believed the military had sea drug operations under control, but was now looking at land. The increased U.S. military presence in the region has raised fears in Caracas of a possible attack. There are reportedly about 10,000 U.S. forces built up in the Caribbean, either on ships or in Puerto Rico, a U.S. territory. A UN-appointed human rights expert UN-appointed human rights experts have described the U.S. strikes as extrajudicial executions. Oh, you mean like the cartels do when they murder people that owe them money? Yeah. BBC, you see, and again, that's that bitch shit, right? Because Trump is doing exactly the same thing the cartels do. But all of a sudden, he's wrong for it. Yeah, fuck these people. Bomb all those motherfuckers. BBC confirmed that 3 B-52 bomber planes, the likes of which have been used during conflicts in Iraq and Syria, took off from Barksdale Air Force Base in the Gulf state of Louisiana. A Global Strike Command spokesperson also confirmed to CBS, the BBC's U.S. media partner, that 3 aircraft had flown missions near Venezuela. Meanwhile, on Thursday, the commander of U.S. Southern Command, Southcom, Navy Admiral Alvin Halsey, announced on social media that he would retire by the end of the year. His purview includes the Caribbean Sea, where the U.S. had conducted strikes against alleged drug boats at Trump's behest. The Southcom team has made lasting contributions to the defense of our nation and will continue to do so, he said. I am confident that you will forge ahead, focused on your mission that strengthens our nation and ensures its longevity as a beacon of freedom around the globe. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth praised Halsey's career and wrote on social media that the admiral demonstrated unwavering commitment to mission, people, and nation. What could the CIA do on Trump's orders in Venezuela? According to the New York Times, Trump's authorization of the CIA would allow the agency to carry out operations in Venezuela unilaterally or as part of any wider U.S. military action. It remains unknown whether the CIA is planning operations in Venezuela or whether those plans are being kept as contingencies. But the spy agency has a long history of activities in South America. Remember when I told you they were already there? Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office on Wednesday alongside FBI Director Kash Patel and Attorney General Pam Bondi, Trump was questioned about the New York Times report. Why did you authorize the CIA to go into Venezuela? A journalist asked. I authorized for 2 reasons, really, Trump said in a highly unusual acknowledgement from the U.S. Commander-in-Chief about an intelligence organization whose activities are typically shrouded in secrecy. Number one, Venezuela, have emptied their prisons into the United States of America. He added, and the other thing are drugs. We have a lot of drugs coming in from Venezuela, and a lot of Venezuelan drugs come in through the sea. So you get to see that. But we're going to stop them by land also. Venezuela plays relatively a minor role in the region's drug trade. The president would not be drawn on whether the CIA's goal was to topple Maduro, for whom the U.S. has offered a $50 million bounty. Wouldn't it be a ridiculous question for me to answer, he said. That's a bad motherfucker right there. In the most recent U.S. strikes on Tuesday, 6 people were killed when a boat was targeted near Venezuela's coast. On Truth Social, Trump said that the intelligence confirmed the vessel was trafficking narcotics, was associated with illicit narcotics networks, and was transiting along a known DTO, drug trafficking organization, drug trafficking route. As has been the case in previous strikes, U.S. officials have not specified what drug trafficking organization was allegedly operating the vessel or the identities of those aboard. Maduro took to the airwaves on Wednesday night to warn against escalation, no to regime change, which reminds us so much of the endless failed wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and so on, said the socialist leader. No to CIA orchestrated coup d'etat. That would be your jackals. He added, listen to me. No war, yes, peace. The people, United States. Earlier in the day, Maduro ordered military exercises in the Caracas suburb of Petare and in neighboring Miranda State on Wednesday. Excuse me. In a message on Telegram, he said he was mobilizing the military police and civilian militia to defend the oil-rich country. Foreign Minister Yvonne Gill said on Telegram that Venezuela rejects the warmongering and extravagant statements of the President of the United States. We view with extreme alarm the use of the CIA as well as the military deployments announced in the Caribbean, which amount to a policy of aggression, threat, and harassment against Venezuela, he added. And again, there's that bitch shit. You've been terrorizing the people in your own country. You emptied your prisons into the United States. You're dumping all your dope in the United States, but we're harassing you. Get the fuck out of here. Well, if that's what you call it, then that's what the fuck we gonna do. Harass the shit out of you until you step down, you fat motherfucker. Trump has deployed 8 warships and a nuclear-powered submarine and fighter jets to the Caribbean in what the White House says is an effort to crack down on drug smuggling. In a leaked memo recently sent to U.S. lawmakers, the Trump administration said it had determined it was involved in a non-international armed conflict with drug trafficking organizations. The U.S. officials have alleged that Maduro himself is part of an organization called the Cartel of the Suns, which they say includes high-ranking Venezuelan military and security officials involved in drug trafficking. Maduro has denied the claims. Of course he denied the claims. He's not going to come out and say, oh, yes, you're right, Trump. I am a dope dealer. But we all know that under the correct leadership, U.S. intelligence can be very accurate. And I believe this. I don't think this is made up. Mick Mulroy, a former CIA parliamentary officer and assistant undersecretary of defense, told the BBC, in order to conduct covert action, there needs to be a presidential finding for the CIA specially authorizing it, which with specific actions identified. Mulroy added that such a finding would mark a substantial increase in efforts against drug trafficking organizations, perhaps a real-life Sicario, he said, referring to a 2015 film that depicts U.S. operatives launching clandestine operations against drug cartels in Mexico. And the word Sicario actually means hitman. So if the CIA is going into Venezuela, then they're going in as Sicarios, then that's the jackals. That's the jackals. Trump is sending in the jackals. So Venezuela will be fucked if they keep trying to defend the dope traffickers. Now, the Guantanamo list. We talked about the Gitmo list years ago. We've been talking about it for years. We finally have confirmation of the existence of the Gitmo list. And guys, don't forget to hit that Cash App, hit the PayPal, hit the Venmo, and support the show. We won't be here much longer, so please support the show. Support while you can. We got 4 supporters on the board. We only need 6 more. We got 53 watching on YouTube. And how many we got on Rumble? And it looks like 13 on Rumble. I don't know why the Rumble numbers are so low. But between you guys, I'm sure we can get 6 supporters on the board. So Guantanamo list. This is what Wikipedia had to say about it. The Guantanamo list, Russian is what it is in Russian, is the list of U.S. politicians and citizens barred from entry into Russia for being responsible for human rights abuses, primarily in Guantanamo Bay detention camp, a symmetric response to the Magnitsky List. So these are people that were involved in human rights abuses at Guantanamo, but this could also mean people who are either destined to be arrested and housed at Guantanamo, or people who are already housed at Guantanamo. The people banned from Russia are listed below. U.S. officials accused of involvement in legalizing torture and indefinite detention of prisoners. David Addington, Chief of Staff to Vice President Dick Cheney. So Dick Cheney's Chief of Staff has made his way to the Gitmo list. John Yoo, Assistant U.S. Attorney General in the Office of Legal Counsel, Department of Justice from 2001 to 2003. That's under Bush. Jeffrey D. Miller, retired U.S. Army Major General, Commandant of the Joint Task Force Guantanamo, the organization that runs the Guantanamo Bay detention camps, under Bush. Jeffrey Harbison, U.S. Navy officer, Commandant of JTF Gitmo, 2010 to 2012. That's under Obama. The Russian lawmakers also banned several U.S. officials involved in the prosecution and trial of Russian arms smuggler Viktor Bout and drug smuggler Konstantin Yaroshenko, both serving prison time in the United States. Well, Viktor Bout actually got released in exchange for that fag Brittany Griner. Jed Rakoff, Senior U.S. District Judge for the Southern District of New York. Preet Bharara, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. These were the people involved in the Trump case, in one of Trump's cases. Michael J. Garcia, U.S. Former Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Brendan R. McGuire, Assistant U.S. Attorney. Anjan S. Sani, Assistant U.S. Attorney. Christian R. Everdale, Assistant U.S. Attorney. Jenna Minucci Dabbs, Assistant U.S. Attorney. Now, these are the people on the Guantanamo list from Russia, but I believe there's a possibility that these people have already been rendered to Guantanamo Bay in the first wave of American prisoners being brought there. Michael Max Rosensaft, Assistant U.S. Attorney. And notice, these are all like unknown names. These are not the famous people. So these are the people you don't know about because you don't hear about. Louis J. Million, Special Agent, U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. Sam Gay, Senior Special Agent, DEA. So they were smuggling drugs. Robert F. Zachariaswich, Special Agent, U.S. DEA. Derek S. Odney, Special Agent, U.S. DEA. Gregory A. Coleman, Special Agent, U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigations. Kim Kardashian, reality star. Wow. No, Barnes, I am in no way, shape, or form suicidal. Even though if they were to murder me, that's the picture they would probably paint, but you know. And after all, I am a Black American man in a relationship with a Black American woman. And given the common knowledge of how most Black American women treat their men, it would be very easy to make the case for me committing suicide. It would be very fucking easy. But no, I'm not suicidal at all. I started drinking again. I'll tell you that. I started sipping that liquor again. And I smoke hella weed. But that's what keeps me going. You know what I'm saying? So There's the Gitmo list confirmed by the Russians. So when we talk about the Gitmo list, this is not something we're making up. This is not something we're pulling out of our ass. This is not what the mainstream media would call conspiracy theory. This is real life. This is real shit. This is reality. That's what this is. So, excuse me. The real war on drugs targeting Venezuela, because Venezuela is a hot spot for all the drug trafficking and human trafficking. And Russia has confirmed that there is, in fact, a Gitmo list. Now, the Russian Gitmo list has to do with deep state players that were involved in the human rights abuses that occurred at Guantanamo Bay under the Bush administration. But at the same time, these could also be individuals that have been rendered to Guantanamo Bay. Don't see or hear much from Kim Kardashian these days, do you? And she's on the original Guantanamo list. So there's that. But nevertheless, what Trump is doing with Venezuela and in the Caribbean and with Southcom, that is the real war on drugs. That's the war on drugs that should have been happening under Reagan. That's the war on drugs that Reagan made us believe that they were actually doing, when in fact they were just targeting black men for exorbitant prison sentences. So now Trump is actually waging the real war on drugs. And we're going to start to see the results of it pretty soon, if we're not seeing it already. So I just wanted to give you guys some insights on what's happening with Venezuela and what's going on with that war, because you're going to hear a lot about it in the mainstream media, but you're not going to hear too much of the truth. You're not going to hear too much of what's actually taking place. You're going to hear the make-believe bullshit bitch story. That's what you're going to hear. You're going to hear the bitch story. You're going to hear the Venezuela are the poor little victims, and the United States is the big, bad, aggressive bulldog that's killing, murdering civilians. That's what you're going to hear. Mind you, there wasn't, when Obama was, they dubbed him President Drone Strike. And when he was killing multiple civilians in the Middle East with the drone strikes, there wasn't all this outrage. Yeah, Barnes, I remember the Bush 41 funeral envelopes. I remember that. That was them being served their indictments. That's what that was. But guys, we're at the end of the show. I don't really have much more to discuss. I hope I was clear and concise enough tonight. I hope you guys learned something. So now when you see the fake news reports about, with them spinning the narrative about what's actually happening, now you have a different point of reference, thanks to Citizen Man. So make sure you guys go subscribe to the Citizen Man backup channel on YouTube if you haven't already. Go create a Rumble account. It's free. You just need an email address. So create a Rumble account. Follow me over on Rumble to get the rest of the content that you can't find on YouTube anymore. And also get yourself a copy of the Lost Book of Herbal Remedies, Metabolic Cooking, and Anabolic Cooking. All three books are linked in the description box of every video. And thank you guys for supporting the show, for those of you who were able to. And if you sat through the show and you feel like if it was worth a buck, then what the fuck? Hit the Cash App, hit the PayPal, hit the Venmo, support the show. The red X through the PayPal is just to remind you guys that PayPal censors comments. So be careful what you say, because they'll try to shut down our accounts, both our accounts. Steal your money and mine because they didn't like what you say. So keep it surface level when commenting on PayPal. And speaking of PayPal, shout out to my good brother Lee14224 on the PayPal. with that faithful support. He says, have a good show. Shout out to my sister Cherokee on the Cash App. She says, good show. Shout out to Rhonda and shout out to Stacy, both also on the Cash App. I appreciate you guys for that support. We got 4. We didn't even make it halfway tonight, but you know what? We got 4 on the board, and 4 is better than none. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for being here. I want to just say that I appreciate you guys supporting the show and, you know, taking an interest in what I have to say, because this is important shit. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for being here. I appreciate you tuning into the show, and I'll see you on the next one. Citizen Man out.